Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Before we begin today, on Monday we will be kicking off our next week special with the Scattering Week. A week of conversation dedicated to the Primarch Scattering. This is one I've been looking forward to for a while. Was it chaos solely responsible? Did the Emperor allow it? Or did he plan it? Oh, some great conversation ahead. Again, we'll be kicking that one off on Monday. However, back to today. Today, we review the Warhammer 40k novel, Lazarus Enmity'S Edge, by author Gary Kloster. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. As always with reviews, I won't be diving into detailed specific spoilers, but I will be discussing particular themes and narratives. And so, with that said, let's waste no time and begin as always by checking out the synopsis off the back of the book. Across the warp storms of the Great Rift, a distress beacon calls for aid. The Rock is listening, for without their Primarch, the Dark Angels have only their oaths to remind them of who they are. Lazarus's Fifth Company are summoned by Supreme Grandmaster Azrael to honour and owe debt to the night world of Reese, a planet upon which the warp has set its hungry gaze. But Lazarus is not so sure Reese wants to be saved. Its nights are long lost, its governance is dogged by political strife, and internecine conflict hampers the world's defence against an ancient evil. An evil which, like Lazarus himself, refuses to die. And as the true enemy finally makes itself known, the Dark Angels are about to learn what it means to be defined by your oaths. Okay, so Lazarus quite obviously follows and focuses on the said named Dark Angel's Fifth Company Master. Personally, I didn't know much about Lazarus before reading this, other than he of course crossed the Rubicon and was blessed with that rather beautiful model. And I have to say, this story really does a great job of not only bringing Lazarus to life, but also his Fifth Company too. The Dark Angels are a tricky chapter to get right. You've got the zealous, almost fanatical Asmodai on the one hand, but then the more standard, silent, blunt, stoic manner of the bloodline on the other. And often the Dark Angels you see fall firmly into either category. However, Lazarus doesn't, at least not quite. He of course has that stoicism within him, of course inherited from his Primarch, but there's actually quite a strong part of Lazarus's nature that vies against the constant need for secrets of his bloodline. Their obsession with the hunt for the fallen. And through the course of this story, you not only see how and why Lazarus feels this way, but how it affects his relationships within the chapter too, and his mindset. Through Lazarus's eyes, we see what it costs the Dark Angels for a change, instead of those around them. So it really ends up presenting a Dark Angel quite unlike the one you're used to seeing, especially one who is within the inner circle, blessed with the realities of the dark truth. It's actually a very fresh and unique take, and in a lot of ways gives Lazarus's story an extra edge underneath. It also helps endear you to the man a little more too. This isn't your prototypical Dark Angel. He's a very different man to Supreme Grandmaster Azrael, for example. And there's an absolutely stellar scene between the two, where this contrast couldn't be more evident. The ultimate symbol of the inner circle that Azrael is. It's absolutely fantastic, and you can feel Azrael's demeanour and piercing gaze leaping out at you. The aura of the Supreme Grandmaster. From just the conversation, it was one of my absolute favourite Azrael portrayals that I've seen, and an excellent way of showing how unique Lazarus is within the chapter. And this, dare I say, warmer, more approachable feeling seemingly extended to the characters of his fifth company too, with Lazarus supported by a strong cast of characters primarily from his command squad, particularly Interrogator Chaplain Demetrius, Apothecary Asbael, Tech Priest Ephron, and Librarian Raziel. You feel a strong sense of comradeship amongst the company, that they fight for each other just as much as their Primarch, with even small moments such as Apothecary Asbael treating and interacting with a mortal human Isentrude, standing out in a way that normally you wouldn't expect to see with Dark Angel characters, and how Lazarus's command squad seems to endear to her over the course of the story, earn a respect for her. Again, it's not something you expect to see from the Dark Angels, and I couldn't stop myself thinking a twist was on the way, that she would be executed for learning something she shouldn't, that it would all end up with the Caliban Protocol having to be enacted. Honestly, because that's what we see with the Unforgiven so often. But it all speaks to not only how refreshing it is to see Dark Angels in a story not obsessed with the Fallen, but also how that fraternity, comradeship, care does still exist within the Unforgiven. And it's not a bad thing or out of character, as you have to remember this isn't the Deathwing you're following around here. This is the Fifth Company. For those characters that are in the inner circle, the truth and secret is still very prevalent, very important to them. And it actually unfolds throughout the story also. And it does become very important in the story too. But it doesn't dominate everything like usual. And again, I just really appreciated that for a little change. I could quite easily see this as the first installment of a Lazarus series moving forward. And I actually hope it is, thanks purely to the strong cast of characters the author created for Lazarus and the Fifth. This could easily be a Dark Angels equivalent to the Uriel Ventris series, Lazarus's continued career supported by his command squad. It did give me vibes of the old school Uriel Ventris series in many ways, and I think it'd be a genuine shame if this strong foundation of characters wasn't continued. Now, the plot itself upon Reese is hard to discuss without giving its twists and turns away, but I will say it's more your unravelling mystery than simple straight up standard battle scenario. There is of course plenty of action, but it's far more story orientated in its execution, which is only a good thing. And of the cast of human characters, they all for the most part come across as unique and authentic, having genuine relationships, the world having been split between a Knight's House and the Adeptus Mechanicus is definitely an original idea I hadn't come across before, adding something more than your typical corrupt governor scenario. And it's also intertwined with the history of the Dark Angels Chapter 2, so there's an added element of animosity bubbling beneath the surface. The standout character here, as I mentioned earlier, would be the character by the name of Isentrude, and her growing interaction and relationship with Lazarus's command squad as the story progresses. It grows to be something honestly quite heartfelt and genuine, certainly not feeling forced or contrived at all. For cons in this one, I will say I was listening to the audio version to begin with, and there were a couple of times admittedly I'd found I'd kind of zoned out and stopped really paying attention. However, I will say, unlike usual where I was sitting down in the quiet somewhere, I was listening whilst doing other things, such as taking the dog out for a walk. So I can't necessarily say it's the fault of the middle half of the story. Yesterday, when my hardback copy arrived, I made sure to sit down on the sofa with the dog in the nice and quiet. and I ended up burning through the last 10 whole chapters. Honestly, loving every step of the way. So I think honestly, if I just made sure to be in the quiet the whole time, without any distractions, or just waited for the hardback copy to arrive, I probably wouldn't have had those zoning out moments. And aside from that, the only real gripe I had is that there was just a bit too much "we are the sons of the lion, we are the dark angels." At times it felt like it was said in pretty much every single conversation. Yes, the line of L. Johnson is a proud lineage, but a little variation on how they showed that would have been great, or at least so it didn't feel so often repeated. I have some minor questions like how a world with a history of demonic invasion hadn't faced exterminatus, or had its population wiped out and been resettled, but honestly that's about it. It is a great fresh take for a Dark Angel story, one that shows us a different side of the Unforgiven than we usually see, and one that still absolutely honours all the factors that make the Dark Angels who they are. So score-wise, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. A absolutely great read and thoroughly recommended. I definitely think the moments I zoned out while listening were probably my fault, given how much I enjoyed that final 10 chapter read. So I am going to sit down and give it a whole reread through from beginning to end. And I really think this could be the foundation for a great Lazarus and the Fifth Company series moving forward. At least the possibility is there with this strong cast of characters that have been developed by the author. If not, we've at least got some great names to put next to Lazarus on the tabletop. But all in all, absolutely great. A fresh take on the Dark Angels and one I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed. But as always everyone, what did you think? Have you read Lazarus yet? And if so, what did you think? Have you not? And are you looking forward to it? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off. And I'll see you all again on Monday for the Scattering Week.